everybody. Welcome back to Real Time JC, Real Time Jesus with me, Stephanie. It is episode 5 day. It is midweek devotion today, and I'm so glad that you are joining me in my quiet space, my date with Jesus, time with God, whatever you want to call this blessed hour. I don't even know where that came from, but special times right now. But seriously, I'm really glad that you're here. Okay, today is episode 5, and the title of our midweek devotion today is Remembering Your Giants, Finding Freedom from Negative Thinking. But first, I don't know if you noticed this, but I am wearing a very cozy sweatshirt because it is fall out. At least it feels like fall out in Surprise, Arizona today. And guys, when it gets under 80, we are putting on the sweatshirts. Some people you're going to see walking around with winter coats and everything. I know it seems a little crazy, but we live for this time of year. From October through April, it becomes really, really nice. Really, really nice. So if you don't already have a cozy sweatshirt on and it won't make you sweat, put one on, grab your cup of coffee, be still and know. And be still and know that He is God, Psalm 46:10. And let's go on a journey. And thank you for joining me on my journey. And I am so honored. It's such a pleasure to join you on yours. So let's dig in. I have a question for you. Maybe a couple of questions for you. Are you a worst case scenario thinker? Take a minute to think about it. Do you tend to go to the negative? Take a minute to think about that. Let's give you a scenario. If somebody were to call you with some exciting news that would be celebratory news, do you typically find and point out what's wrong with their news? Okay, another scenario. When you are having a conversation with a friend, do the beginning of your sentences start with, I'm concerned with, or maybe, I'm worried that? If that is typically in your language, then you may be a worst case scenario thinker. Google calls it a catastrophic thinker. And why is that? Because our brains were wired to be worst case scenario thinkers back, way BC, in the caveman days. It was fight, flight, freeze, or die. Basically, they were in survival mode literally all the time. So picture this. Your husband has died. Let's just use husband-wife terms. You're the wife. The husband has died. He's been killed already by a saber-toothed tiger. And you've got a baby on your hip, you've got a toddler down here, and you've got a club in your hand at all times. Because either you're thinking about not being attacked by a wild animal who wants to eat you alive, being bitten by an animal like a snake, maybe an insect, mosquito, finding food, not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, dying because of weather conditions, or just being out in nature and not being able to really survive. I mean, you're consistently having to think about what could possibly happen in order to help you survive. And so fast forward thousands of years, do we think about those things right now so much? Not really. I mean, really in America, we have it good. Most of us watching this would probably have food on the table. We would have a pillow to lay our head on at nights. We have protection through our police and military, even through our family members, the ones that we live with. If something tragic would happen, like say for instance, a spouse would pass away or a parent would pass away, we most likely would have people rallying around us to take care of us, to help provide for us in that time of need. And so our minds don't necessarily have to be thinking the worst case scenario like to that extreme, like back in the day. Now, some some exceptions to that would be if you have walked through an abusive situation, whether physically, mentally, psychologically, and so you are conditioned to respond certain ways because of the abuse that you've walked through, or for fear of just not being able to have a normal, healthy relationship. So outside of having a toxic type of environment, our brains don't need to go to worst case scenario anymore. So why do we still do this? Why do we still do this? So a lot of times it could be because you had a traumatic childhood. It could be because you experienced some abuse in your childhood, or you had a parent that was pessimistic, that was maybe critical, judgmental, that would go to the worst case scenario all the time, so that they modeled that, or they were that way to you, towards you. You would see them model that around, whether it be your brothers, sisters, husband, wife, friendships. So you may have that experience, and maybe you were a soldier and you walk through some situations that cause PTSD, and so you have that. Maybe you've walked through chronic illness, and you wake up every day and your joints are hurting, or you just don't feel good, and so you don't really know how to expect something good because you're used to feeling not good. So I think in my quiet time today, what God was showing me is that He wants you to know that He is there in the midst of all of that. In the midst of all of it, that His love is powerful. And while we walk through situations and we walk through circumstances that are not okay, that are hard, that are difficult, that in some cases are physically painful, physically painful, whether from a physical illness or whether from an injury or whether from emotional injury, we walk through those things, but God is there always in the midst of it. We just have to look for Him in those things. Are we promised a life of no trouble? Absolutely not. We are not promised that life. So what we have to do is find out how His love is demonstrated and look for those things. So to do that, we're going to focus on one of the ways that God demonstrates His love. And that is through remembering past circumstances, past situations, and finding Him in the midst of those things. Okay, so let's talk about Joseph. Oh my goodness, Joseph. What a great story. What a great example of the faithfulness of God, of somebody walking through crazy circumstances. I mean, the guy was thrown into a pit. He was the most beloved son of his father. He was taken away by his brothers. Joseph's thinking he's going on a fun little trip. His brothers ransack him, throw him into a pit, thinking it's awesome and fun and funny, but they were jealous of the love that his father had for him. And so they end up selling him to a slave trader. The slave trader sells him to a high-ranking military official, to the Egyptian pharaoh. And so he becomes a servant in the house of Potiphar. Potiphar had a very beautiful wife, a very charming wife, a wife who was very unhappy, a wife who had probably been more ear and eye candy, and not somebody that was really super admired for her mind and anything outside of her just being beautiful. And so she was hurting. And so she tried to tempt Joseph because she saw in him attributes of God, basically of God. So Joseph had very special gifts. He dreamed dreams, and God gave him visions through these dreams, and they were prophetic dreams, and they were definite gifts. So Joseph had a lot of incredible strengths and characteristics of God that were downloaded from God, like in his DNA, and so it was very attractive. And he was very tempted by Potiphar. But what he did was he didn't compromise by the advances from Potiphar's wife. And what happened was Lady Potiphar, she got kind of hurt and emotionally hurt, and she was embarrassed and felt shameful. And so instead of turning to God, which she didn't really know God, she lied about it to her husband. Her husband became very angry. He threw him in prison. And there, Joseph spent years in prison. During that time, Joseph could have turned his back on God. And I'm sure he had moments where he's like, what have I done? What have I done to deserve all that I have been given, all that has been thrown at me, all the way that I've been treated? Like, how am I in this situation? How could I have actually, how is this happening? I'm sure there are moments of that. I'm sure there are moments that he felt like he may have been in that prison forever. But God worked through Joseph's life in that prison. And Joseph became a man of respect in that prison. I mean, you never know. Like the situations that you're in that God allows you to walk through, the way that your character is through, the way that you carry yourself through those situations, the way that you lean on God and people around you, and how they see you, just always going back to God, always pointing back to God, leaning on Him, praying and seeking Him, wrestling with Him, and not allowing the circumstances around you to rule you. That speaks to others around. That speaks to others who are surrounding you and watching you through it, whether you realize it or not. Well, Joseph started to get known for having these dreams and being able to interpret other people's dreams. It was pretty cool. And it started to go up the chain until the Pharaoh had these dreams, and he couldn't figure it out. He couldn't figure out what they meant. Joseph comes in, he interprets these dreams, and these dreams start to come into reality. The interpretation did. And so Joseph was snapped out of prison and became part of Pharaoh's top dogs through all this. Now, I'm just paraphrasing this story, but he became second in command and he ruled the Egyptian kingdom. And then he had the opportunity, as the land went through a famine, for his family to come back or to come to Egypt to ask for food and grains, because they were not going to live unless they came and asked. And he was able to find restoration with his brothers and be reunited with his father. So God ended up using him for greater things. And had he not walked through all of those moments, all of the circumstances, all of the times that he just felt like he wanted to give up, and where the enemy, Satan, was trying to defeat him, he could have gone a whole other direction. He could have gone into that negative thought pattern and down that road deep, and not been the Joseph that we know him now, because he chose to trust in the love of his father and to trust that God had a plan for his life, and that the reasons why he was walking through it were this. And let me tell you what it is. In Genesis 50:20, he says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Oh my goodness. Let me read that again. You intended to harm me. The enemy intends to harm you. But God intended it for good. God intends the situations that you walk through, the situations that you don't even know that you're going to go through. He intends it for your good, for his good, for good, to accomplish what is now being done for your growth, for your development. And why? Why? For the saving of many lives. For the saving of many lives. So could Joseph have gone down the negative thought pattern process road? Did he choose not to? Yes. Was it probably hard? Absolutely. Absolutely was it hard. Yes. Is it going to be hard for you to stop going to the negative, to stop thinking worst case scenario? It might be. But here are some things that might help you, okay? So in Deuteronomy, this is crazy. Okay, Deuteronomy was Moses. Oh gosh, now I'm saying it a million times and I can't even, like, plural. Okay, Deuteronomy was Moses's farewell address. My gosh, to the new generation of Israelites that were preparing to enter the promised land. So they had been wandering around the desert for 40 years. Now remember this, and if you don't know this story, after Moses brought the Israelites, God brought the Israelites through Moses out of Egypt. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. Go for it. Take a sip of yours. Okay, so he brought the Israelites out of Egypt. They wandered around in the desert for like 40 years, guys. What? 40 years. But God did a lot of supernatural things. He did miraculous things. He gave them food, manna from heaven, water from rocks. There were just so many different things. Well, after a while, they were wandering around so long that people started to pass away. That generation, the old generation, started to pass away, and the new generation came and were born, and it was their generation that was going to be entering into the promised land. So Moses wanted to take some time to really remember some of those things that God did for the generation prior as they went into the promised land, to remind them of God's love, to remind them of the power of God, to remind them of the strength of God. And so all of Deuteronomy is like that farewell address from Moses, because he did not go into the promised land, but from Moses to that next generation of Israelites in there. And so it talks about, for at least 14 times in this book of Deuteronomy, Moses used the word remember. So I wanted to challenge you, as maybe it's step one, to start writing down the things that God has done in your life that maybe you haven't recognized. So let's talk about some of mine real quick. So, okay, this is really cool. You were there when my son was born and rushed into intensive care. You comforted me and gave me your peace. That's one of mine. Another one that I wrote down today. You were there when my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancer. You were steady and you healed my mother of this disease. Here's another one. You were there as my healthy baby son was born, and I remember feeling so thankful and so complete. Oh my gosh, here's another one. You were also there when that son took a head-to-head hit, the last play of the last football game of his 8th grade year. As he was rushed to the hospital, you were there. As I saw tears in his eyes, you were there. As you restored his health, you were there. And I go on to have many, many more of these that I've written down, and these are just a few. And as you think about writing down some of these remembrance times of God in your life, start to give away some of the stuff that you held on that may have been negative, that puts you down that path of not trusting in God and trying to control things yourself, so that you can release the control back to God and truly have faith that He's got this. Trust in that He has got this, and He can do it better than you. He can do it better than you. He can. One more. Oh, you were there as my baby girl in all of her sweetness, her gentleness, sang for the first time, leading precious souls into the throne room of worship. How you've grown and used her. Remember those wonderful times, the times that aren't connected to any negative thoughts. But remember the times that are, and I want you to focus at the end of writing those times down what God delivered you from in those times, okay? So this could be step 1 for you, but I promise you guys, this will be a freeing time, and it may take you some time to do this. So get out your pen, get out your paper, get in your quiet time spot, whether it's in your car, whether it's in your bedroom, just like mine, whether if you have to go into a closet because all the kids are going to just distract you, everything, husbands, kids, wives. But start working on it. And a verse for today, remember this in Isaiah 26:3. This is good stuff. You will keep in perfect peace him whose mind is steadfast because he trusts in you. Another version of that is this: perfect, absolute peace surrounds those whose imaginations are consumed with you. They confidently trust in you. Good, 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 good stuff. I have a question for you, and then I'm going to let you go. If he confidently brought you through what you've been through before, don't you think he can bring it through you again? Yeah, yes, he can. Well, if you haven't already, subscribe to Real Time JC. Share this video, share some other videos, and we will see you back soon for another episode in just a couple of days. Have a great day, and don't forget, you are absolutely 100% loved by your dad, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Bye.